Occlude is a new release from developer Tributary Games, which describes itself as a cosmic horror card game. From initial appearances, you could be forgiven for thinking that it's little more than a slightly spooky Solitaire, but you'll quickly learn that there's a lot more going on here than those first impressions might suggest. Tributary previously released the party game King of the Castle, which looked like decent fun, but unfortunately enough for me, requires that you've got, friends, so I never actually got round to playing it myself. I could also talk at some length about how I love what the game's publisher, Pantaloon, is up to, from championing the indie sphere's most bold and bizarre games in their monthly newsletter, through which they also, for what it's worth, give out a handful of game keys, to publishing some of those themselves. There seems to be some exciting work going on over there. Games in their label include the ambitious atmospheric Subverge from a couple of months ago, and Occlude is the next in line in what might hopefully become a long list of weirder, perhaps riskier, games. As mentioned at the start of this video, Occlude is based on Solitaire, but to quote the message players get upon starting it up for the first time, it's a difficult game and unlike normal Solitaire. The rules are hidden and it's up to you to decipher the meaning of the coins. This presents itself in the form of rituals which players need to solve across their playthrough, each of which comes with its own stipulations. They all have some things in common, however. For example, unlike in regular Solitaire, in Occlude each suit can be completed from either end simultaneously, meaning your final card can be anything from a 2 all the way up to a queen. The ultimate aim of each ritual is to end the round with the correct 4 final cards, one per suit, chosen randomly at the start of each round. Should you, at any point, place your target card before the rest of the suit has been completed, the gold coin you're hoping to be awarded with will turn black and display a skull. You won't successfully complete the ritual this time, but you might get some information that will help you on your next attempt. The target cards will change, but the rules, the way you identify those target cards, won't. These rules are effectively what happens to those 4 coins when you do something in the game. We'll take the very first ritual, the Magician, as an example. This one is given to players in the tutorial as a small introduction to the game's core mechanics and is, by Occlude standards, very straightforward. The rules for the Magician's ritual are that whenever you pick up any of the 4 cards that should be your final cards, the coin will shift position, from the top section to the bottom, and whenever you let it go, the coin returns to the top. The game is telling you, in the most simple of ways, that that is the target card. You can right-click to mark those with a little stamp, and as long as you can go on to finish the Solitaire game with those as your final cards, you'll successfully complete the ritual. Of course, that's by far the easiest one. Players will quickly encounter rituals where their coins move around without any clear reason as to what's causing it, at least to begin with. I know I'm perhaps not being as clear as I could be here, but there's a good reason to be a bit coy with my language. Once a ritual's been solved, it takes a lot of the fun out of the game. Cracking what the game is trying to tell you in each instance is pretty much the entire point of Occlude. I'm okay giving away the first ritual, as I'd hope anyone playing would figure that one out almost immediately, but I'd rather avoid any spoilers at all for the rest. At launch, the game has 7 rituals, though there are suggestions from Tributary that more might follow in the future. As it is, the 7 available build up in difficulty across the playthrough, with the final one being a particularly challenging affair that might well require some additional help from elsewhere in the game. Before you get to that, there's the other 6 to worry about, though, each of which teaches you a little bit more about the game and the world it's set in. The sadist in me thinks I would have liked some much more devious rituals, ones where it would take me a lot longer to figure them out, but on the other hand, I was close to getting frustrated by the lone ritual that I got a little stuck on. In the end, it was actually relatively simple and solved quite quickly with the help of some trusty pen and paper, a trick I carried on using to good effect for the game's remaining rituals. Balancing a game like Occlude seems from the outside like a small nightmare. Tributary have implemented 2 different modes to help remedy this. There's the classic mode, which is effectively the base version, Occlude as intended, but then also the much more forgiving story mode, which allows players to experiment more freely, so that if they truly are stumped, they can try and figure out the rituals there instead. After they've learnt the rules, they can take that information back across to classic mode and solve it with the game's typical restrictions. I always have to be wary of sounding like an arrogant person when talking about the difficulty level with these sorts of logic-adjacent games, because they're pretty much the one thing that I'll actually say that I'm good at. But it does mean that I probably want them to lean a little bit harder than most other players, and as such, harder than it's sensible for the developers to make them. That story mode remained untouched for me, but hopefully it acts as a decent safety net for players who'd rather dive into the game's lore without needing to worry quite as much about the game's more challenging aspects. That lore has some depth to it. If you're hoping for a world where everything is laid out neatly for you, this isn't it. Players are given small segments of story from across a wide range of dates, as well as documents which provide clues towards what's going on in the game's world, but it is all, by intention, a little difficult to unpack. While not required to enjoy Occlude, there's also a hefty amount of narrative outside of the game itself. The developers have a series of 10 Occlude lore drops planned based on Steam review milestones, as well as an external ARG that's also set in the game's mysterious world. If you're completely disinterested in the story, it's all pretty unobtrusive. At some point, players will need to take a glance at those documents for some fairly important hints, but otherwise it's more or less ignorable. Those hints aren't buried deep within lines of text or hidden behind puzzles either. This isn't a game which will punish you for not taking a deep dive into its lore, though it's clear to see that a lot of work has gone into it, and investing in it provides some much needed substance, which the game might feel a little bare without. I hope that Occlude does well enough that Tributary can continue to work on it, as I'm fascinated to see where they'd go with it next. There's clearly a lot of passion going into it, so I'd love to see them expand on it, both in the immediate, obvious form of more rituals, but then also in more creative ways, though exactly how that would manifest itself I'll leave in their very capable hands. It's one of those ones where the more you're willing to engage with it, the more you'll get out of it. The baseline is a relatively enjoyable take on Solitaire that will keep you entertained for a few hours and be just about worth its entry fee. But for players who click with it and want to dig deeper, there's definitely a lot more than that on offer. Moreover, I can't help but feel there's something quite special bubbling even further under the surface. It mightn't be present just yet at release, but there's an awful lot of potential there. For now, Occlude is awarded a 7.5 out of 10 by IndieLoupe. But out of the corner of my eye, I'll be watching.